All right. So they say the story of a Jew that's riding the train. Tonight we're going to go with the train. So he's sitting on the train. A Cossack walks into his car. Cossack, this tall, 6'8", Cossack, scary, sits right down next to him. He says, Yid, you, what's your brains? They say the Jews are so smart. Tell me, what's the secret to your brilliance? And the Jew says, it's very simple. It's very simple. We have something called herring. Schmaltz herring. Schmaltz herring. We eat the schmaltz herring. This makes us smart. He says, schmaltz herring. Where do you get schmaltz herring? Where is this? He says, well, it's something that Jews get, but I actually happen to have one in my bag. And if you would like, I can sell it to you. So you sell me schmaltz herring. I get the brains of a Jew. How much will you sell it to me? One container. He says, one container, I give it to you for $10. 10 ruble. Says 10 ruble. It's a lot of money. He says, but if you want the brains, you got to pay. He said, okay, fine. So he gives him 10 ruble. He gobbles down the herring. The train makes a stop a few minutes later. It's a 15-minute stop in a city. The cousin goes out and he comes storming back in 5 minutes later and screaming at the Jew, you deceived me, you lied to me. He says, what do you mean? He says, I went into the store over here at the supermarket in the train station. I found the same schmaltz herring. And over here, they're selling it for $4.99. You're selling it to me for 10 ruble. You're stealing, you're thieving. He says, you see, it's already working. So this is the brilliance. This is the Talmud. The brilliance of Talmud is, it gives us a way of thinking. A way of thinking. We come to this way, we come to another way. But it gives us a Yiddish cup. A Yiddish cup. The concept of a Yiddish cup. And that's where we want to begin tonight's lesson with. The Talmudic logic is extremely unique. There's a whole logic behind the way of thinking. And Talmud gives us a number of unique ways of thinking. Of course, we're not going to be able to get through all of them tonight, but we'll get through a nice amount. And we want to really focus on two important ways of thinking, which really can help you in your whole life. Your whole life. Okay, so let's start with the first one. The first one is that before we even start with the first one, first of all, we have to know one very important thing, and that is good things don't come easy. Good things don't come easy. Remember the line. Good things don't get this. A great story. There was a senator that wanted to meet the Rebbe. And the whole story, they tried to get him an appointment. He first didn't want to meet, and then they convinced him to meet. Finally, he gave an appointment for like 6 months later. Only available appointment. He comes. What time does he start? The Rebbe starts meeting people at 9 p.m. Goes until 6 a.m. He comes there at 9 p.m. What time am I meeting? And 2 a.m. Anyway, you're gonna wait. I'm gonna wait this long until 2 a.m. It's worth it. So finally, he's agitated. He's tired. He walks into the office and he says, "It's harder to get an appointment by you." This is where he starts. And by the Pope. So the rabbi says, "Good things don't come easy." That was the line. Remember that line. But the truth is, when you learn the Talmud, it's a good thing. It's not going to come easy. Actually, there's 12 verses for the Torah, from the Talmud, different places from the Tanakh, different verses that the Rebbe encouraged the little children should know them by heart. If you see my kids, you can ask them these 12 verses, they'll tell you, they'll repeat them all by heart. Even Shila, 3-year-old, she knows quite a few of them by heart. So something that they're encouraged. The 12 kids, like the first verse of the Torah, Bereshis, fundamental verses, Torah, Tziva, Lamed, Moshe, Barasha, Kilas, Yaakov, the Torah is our inheritance. Shema Yisrael, Hashem Elokeinu, Hashem Echad. Now the famous different verses that God is with us, God's watching over us. Very powerful ideas. V'yahavta l'reacha kamocha, love your fellow, just like you love yourself, like fundamentals. So this is one of the 12. And now, if kids should know it, how much more so, of course, all of us should know it. Well, let's read it inside. It comes from the Talmud. As I mentioned, some of them are from the Torah, some from the Talmud. So this is the one from the Talmud. a very, very powerful line. Okay? Let's see it. Text number one, page 173. Okay? So,
Rabbi Yitzhak said, if a person tells you, I toiled but did not find success, do not believe them. I did not toil but found success. Do not believe them. I toiled and I found success. Believe them.
okay, so you can't have one without having the other. Right? You can't say, oh, I found it all. I understand. You didn't even work any. You think you really understand it? You're only beginning to understand the beginning of the beginning, right? You want to really understand it. You got to really work hard. You want to really, really understand it. You got to work really hard. That's a fundamental of anything in life, but specifically and uniquely for sure for Talmud. And many of us, unfortunately, don't really work hard. Many of us don't really work hard. We go through life. It's easy. We got a job. We work the job. How many times a day, how many days of our life can we say and we pinpoint, I really worked hard today. I thought hard into this concept. I figured out the point, right? This like programmer maybe, you have to deeply think into finally he came with the solution. So now we're packing bags in Julasco. You know what I mean? We're going through the day, but we're really working hard. This is one of the unique beauties of Talmud learning, that it makes you work hard. It makes you work hard. And this is what's required when you learn Torah. When you learn Torah, yeah, you're reading some interesting stories from the Tanakh, the story of Purim. You'll read it off like, you lay in bed with your feet on top of your couch, holding a cigarette. But if you want to really learn a piece of Gemara, you got to sit by the table, sit straight. You got to be focused after a good night's rest. You got to work hard. It doesn't just come. So this is the number one point. That you work hard, you'll have a true appreciation. And why is this? By the way, some might ask, is there a difference between Ashkenazi Talmud and Sephardic Talmud? Is this Talmud? No, they're all the same Talmud for everyone. The Talmud, the Babylonian Jerusalem, as we're going to see later, that's the only difference. But this next line is by a very famous rabbi, the Ben Yishchai, and he explains what is so special about working hard. So here's a Sephardic rabbi. That's why I'm just saying he was a Sephardic rabbi, a very famous one. And he says, text 2, Larissa.
God gave us the Torah as a closed book, secured with multiple chains, so that it requires much toil to discover the ideas hidden within it. This ensures that we do not study Torah casually, but rather out of great love. The one who studies casually doesn't wish to exert or trouble themselves, whereas one who studies out of love for the material will exert much effort.
Okay. You got to work in it, work hard, and you're going to be able to appreciate it and remember it. But here's the next point. So that's point number one. You got to know that you're going to have to work hard. And today we're going to have to work hard. Today we're going to put on our working hard. We're going to try to work hard. We'll try to, hopefully you had a good day. Yeah, you had a good dinner, some food, you need a coffee. Let me know. We're going to work hard. But before we work hard, let's make it a little bit easier. We're going to go through a few points. Okay. The first point we want to bring up is Yiddish line, which is Halt cup. Who knows what that means? Halt cup? Anyone? Halt and cup?
The cup is ahead.
The cup is ahead. Very good. Huh?
Hold your head.
Hold. Very good. Right. Hold your head, which means you gotta concentrate. You gotta hold. Your head has to be able to hold all the different stuff that are happening. And we're gonna bring up this, and we're gonna bring up the next thing, and the next thing, and bring another thing, and disprove it, and then come back to the original answer and say, oh, the original answer actually you go back to the original way and a different way. And all that you have to hold. And let me give you an example. There's a joke, another joke. The story of we're talking about trains, another joke of a train, let's say. So here's a guy, he comes into the train and he sees an older man sitting there. He's a youngster, he's in his 20s. He goes over to him and says, sir, do you have the time? He says, get away from me. Go back to your place. I don't want to look at you. I want to talk to you. He says, wow, that's rude. Just asking you for the time. He said, I understand exactly what is going to happen here. You're going to ask me for the time. I'm going to tell you the time. Then you're going to ask me where I'm going. I'm going to tell you where I'm going. It's going to be to the same city. Then you're going to sit next to me. And then when we're going to leave the train, you're going to follow me. I'm going to ask you if you have dinner plans tonight. You're going to say you don't. So I'll say, okay, come to my house for dinner. I have a daughter who is marriageable age. She's going to see you. She's going to fall in love with you. And she's going to ask your hand for marriage. And I would never give my daughter to someone who doesn't have a watch, can't afford a watch. So this is Kohalti Cup. This guy made a whole calculation in steps, right? We're coming to that. The point is, when you have a piece of Talmud, there's a whole chain. And as we studied, if you remember, the whole back and forth of Pesach, 3 hours, 3.5 hours, Rabbi Yossi, Rabbi Yehuda, Rabbi Zera, Rabbi Yehuda, Rabbi Meimar, the second price and the first price, right? That's all Halting Cup. But maybe before we jump in to our next important point, let's do Chazara. Chazara, if you remember, we spoke about that last week, which is the importance of learning over. The idea that you studied first, because this is the way you retain something. If you learn something once, again and again, you remember for life. They always say, you got to learn something 101 times. Why 101 times? Why not 100 times? Because back in the days, they used to study 100 times everything. If you do it 101, that's more than regular. And then you're going to for sure remember it. And that's really working hard. The point is, if you learn something usually once, learn it twice. You learn something twice, learn it 3 times. You'll push yourself to learn more and retain it better. And that's why it's so important to learn and study again. So we'll actually, instead of studying this together again, they put a video recap of the idea of the Pesach discussion as a video. Just we'll watch it over. But this is the idea of Halting Cup. We have one way. We have the Mishnah, and we have bring a brayso with 2 rabbis. We'll bring another brayso that opinion is going disproving this one. That's all Halting Cup in order to come to the end to remember that we're going to go back to the original, right? So let's watch it a little.
To study Talmud like a pro, you've got to halt cup. That's a Yiddish expression for the ability to follow a multi-step Talmudic debate. To see how that works, let's tune into a debate about the afternoon before Passover. We have a Mishnah here, and it lays down a rule. Don't eat a full meal on the afternoon before the Passover Seder, so that you can eat your Passover dinner with gusto. But here's another Talmudic text, a Braita, and it identifies 2 authorities who issue conflicting decisions regarding eating on the afternoons before Shabbat and festivals. Rabbi Yehuda forbids eating a meal on any of those afternoons. Rabbi Yossi permits eating on all of them until the Shabbat or festival actually begins. Now, the way the Mishnah works is that it's highly specific. If it mentions a prohibition only in regards to Passover, it clearly considers Passover a unique occasion. But in the Braita, neither Rabbi Yehuda nor Rabbi Yossi mention the differentiation between Passover and Shabbat and festivals. And the Mishnah must reflect one of their opinions. So which one can it be? Let's take a closer look. In the Braita, Rabbi Yehuda maintains a prohibition on all occasions, with no mention of Passover being unique, whereas the Mishnah considers Passover unique. So the Mishnah cannot reflect Rabbi Yehuda's view. But Rabbi Yossi, on the other hand, rejects the prohibition on any festival or Shabbat, seemingly allowing the afternoon before Passover as well. So the Mishnah cannot reflect his view either. So whose opinion does the Mishnah reflect? For that, the Talmud introduces a sage named Rav Huna, who suggests that we misunderstood Rabbi Yossi. Although Rabbi Yossi generally rejects the prohibition, he probably considers Passover unique due to the special mitzvah of matzah, eating matzah on the night of Passover. So Rabbi Yossi would concede that Passover Eve warrants a prohibition. And if that's the case, then Rabbi Yossi draws a distinction between Passover and other occasions. And then the Mishnah can reflect Rabbi Yossi's view. But wait, there's another sage, Rav Papa, He suggests that we misunderstood Rabbi Yehuda. He points out that Jewish law provides two timing options for afternoon prohibitions. And based on that, he argues that Rabbi Yehuda would consider Passover unique due to the timing of the prohibition. Perhaps for Passover, the prohibition begins at the 9th hour of the day, whereas on all other occasions, it begins later, at 9.5 hours. So what Rav Papa is telling us is that Rabbi Yehuda might still consider Passover unique, at least in the matter of timing. And if that's the case, then the Mishnah can be reconciled with Rabbi Yehuda. And if that would be true, then our theory about Rabbi Yossi might be wrong, and that he does not consider Passover unique after all, therefore the Mishnah does not express Rabbi Yossi's opinion. So which way do we go? At this point, the Gemara introduces a second Braita text. It states clearly the hour at which the eating prohibitions begin on Shabbat Eve, from the 9th hour. So there we have it. The prohibition on Shabbat Eve begins at 9 hours, not 9.5. And we know that Passover Eve prohibition begins at that time as well. So there's no timing difference between any of those occasions according to Rabbi Yehuda. This is proof that the Mishnah cannot be reconciled with Rabbi Yehuda. Now, we must assume that Rabbi Yossi does distinguish between Passover and the other occasions, and that the Mishnah reflects his view. But then the Gemara introduces Mar Zutra, who questions the accuracy of that second Braita. Because if that text is erroneous, it changes the entire equation. In other words, if the second Braita text is erroneous, then the prohibition on the afternoons before Shabbat and festivals might actually begin at 9.5 hours, which would once again leave room for Rabbi Yehuda to claim that Passover is unique, because it begins earlier than that, at 9 hours. In that case, the Mishnah would be reconciled with Rabbi Yehuda, and we could argue that Rabbi Yossi fails to consider Passover unique, which would mean that the Mishnah does not jive with Rabbi Yossi. At this point, the Gemara introduces a fact-checking mechanism. It quotes a sage named Mar Remar, or Rav Yemar, who reported that the Braita was taught publicly by the great Rav Pinchas, which proves its accuracy. So the Braita must not be erroneous. So the prohibition begins at 9 hours on every occasion, and there is no distinction between Passover and other occasions according to Rabbi Yehuda. That being the case, the Mishnah contradicts Rabbi Yehuda. And we must therefore assume that Rabbi Yossi does indeed consider Passover unique, like Rav Huna proposed. So the Mishnah can be happily and satisfactorily reconciled with Rabbi Yossi. Now, although we took time to sort through the Gemara's discussion on this topic, the Gemara itself is rather cryptic. In its own words, the conclusion of the argument simply reads, the Braita is accurate, so Rav Huna's interpretation is the correct one. A Talmud student must halt cup, keeping all of the intervening arguments in mind to see how one argument stacks upon the next until the Talmud reaches its conclusion. Easy? No, but well worth the intellectual ride.
Okay.
I think this would be better taught.
Yeah. Okay. Okay, that's a good point. So Neil, the video went a little bit too fast. First of all, one point to consider is that the video was really just a recap of what we were learning in last week and 2 weeks ago. But second of all, the main point we're trying to bring out from the video is that you have to always halt cup. You have to remember this point, the next. That's the idea from Gemara. Even if you don't remember all the back and forth, that's okay, right? You can always relook at the video. I'll send it. But the main point that we're trying to bring out is the way you learn Gemara is by halting cup, and that's the crucial point here. Okay. Of course.
But isn't that important whether we have an hour or an hour and a half before, 3 hours? What is the big difference?
Right. That's a good. So Alan is asking, what's the big difference if you have your meal a little bit 30 minutes before an hour? So we're speaking about it. During when we learned the class on this subject. It's the Talmud. It's not always. You have to remember one premise. One truth is that everything is important. even if it's not relevant to your life, if this is what God wants, this is the wisdom of God. We're trying to understand God's wisdom, and ultimately, that's what's important. It's not even if it makes a difference if it's 30 minutes before, 30 minutes later. It's about understanding what God wants from us. It's a much deeper appreciation. We're trying to understand the God's way of thinking is, right? The Torah. So therefore, we're going to discuss it and argue it and try to really delve into it. And we spoke about that at length in last week's class. How valuable that is. The importance of really appreciating uh, uh, every word of the Torah, every word of the Mishnah. So that's the idea.
Calculating the night out.
So again, we spoke about that a little in last week's class. The ninth hour goes from the beginning of the day. So whenever the day starts, 9 hours into the day. But also, we split the day a little differently. It's not 12 hours and 12 hours. Rather, we give 12 hours into the daytime. So let's say a winter day that only has, let's say, 10 hours of light. We merge 12 hours into 8, right? So we'd have a little more than an hour, right? You'd have you'd have the day, the hour wouldn't be considered a 60-minute hour, it would be considered a little bit less than an hour. I'd say a 51-minute hour, right? Depends on the day, the time of the year, the hours could be a little more, a little less. Right? In the summer, an hour could be an hour and 10 minutes. You have to get 12 hours into 14 hours, right? And in the winter, so that's when you calculate Shabbos, you calculate, right, sunrise, sunset for a different class. That's not that's another healthy cup.
But
But
Rabbi,
let's stay focused. Yes.
yeah, no, just back when the Gemara was written, their ability to differentiate time to that degree of 9 hours versus 9.5 hours would have been very difficult to be precise. Plus, with the time of the sun coming up, they might not be so precise.
That's an
Just
interesting question, Jack. There's actually someone here in Lakeview that put out what's called a sundial style that you could hang it on your window and it will tell you, made the lines for what time in the day is to say the Shema, to end the prayer, to bring in Shabbos. Shabbos is over at midday, and literally, if you get it, I could connect you to it if you want to get it for your window. If you have, especially if you have a window where the sun is bouncing off quite bright, then it could be more exact. But they had ways of knowing. They had ways of knowing. I'm
very
trying to
good.
say,
Thank you.
even today, we're doing it, right? Especially then, that was their form of knowledge of time. Of course, they knew it. Okay, so 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 that's the point number one. Point number one is that we have to halt cup. If when we learn Gemara, we have to be able to always remember everything that's going on, and there's always a lot that's going on. But here's the second point, and that is what's called, and this is a very, very fascinating point. It's called, in English, the balancing act. What does the balancing act mean? The balancing act means like this, that when a Mishnah says something that we don't understand, the Gemara that will then go and question it, right? But if the Mishnah will tell us something that is completely, well, the Mishnah tells something that's completely wrong, of course not, right? But if the Mishnah will also tell us something that we also understand on our own, that also wouldn't make any sense for a Mishnah to say. Let me give you an example. Would it make sense for a Mishnah to say grass is blue? No, right? Because that's wrong. Everyone knows that's wrong. So why would a Mishnah say grass is blue? It doesn't make any sense. But suppose a Mishnah says grass is green. Would you ask a question then also? Yeah, you'd also ask the question. Why does a Mishnah need to tell you that grass is green? Everybody knows grass is green, right? Doesn't make any sense. Why would a Mishnah tell you something so simple that grass is green? So then we come to Gemara. The Gemara, then we go and analyze. Why is the Mishnah telling us the grass is green? So then the Gemara might go on to say, we need to say that grass is green because in Cleveland, during the winter, there might be grass that is brown, and therefore we come and say that no grass is green. You know, something like that, right? The Gemara will go give us some explanation why something so simple that you would think it the opposite way. And therefore, we need to tell you, no, this is the true way. You might think the opposite way, and therefore we're going to tell you this is the true way, right? Like if you remember the example we brought, 4 cups of wine you give to the poor person for the Seder night. So what did the Gemara ask? The Gemara said, that's so simple. Of course, if he's a poor man, you're giving him food. Of course, you'll give him 4 cups of wine for Pesach. So what are that's the Gemara's question. Pshita. Pshita means this is too simple. Like, why would you even think opposite? So what is the Gemara answer? Rabbi Akiva said he shouldn't take money from the food bank. It was one of the advice that he gave to his son. 7 pieces of advice. For Pesach, you should take the money, and you should not only take 1 cup of wine, you should take 4 cups of wine. Right? So the Gemara will ask, this is too simple, and then the Gemara will give us the opposite logic. Right? Now the Gemara could even do this, even in a place where we know that the law will be this way. It will still give you the opposite logic to understand the other way of thinking, and then we can really deeply appreciate the first way of thinking. And I'll give you an example. There's a law that after you eat bread, you have to say the grace after meal. Benching. If you're eating a meal with 3 people, you say what's called zimun, which is before you do the grace after meal, you say, Rabotai Nevarech. Let's all do the grace after meal together. You invite everyone together. If you have 10 people, 10 men, then you'll even say with God's name. Nevarech Elokeinu, you say God's name. But if you have 3 men, you just say, let's do the grace after meal. Rabotai Nevarech. Or Yiddish, Rabbi Samir Velenbenchek. Okay. Now, there needs to be 3 men. The Mishnah then goes on to say, who qualifies to be part of this? And it says, it needs to be 3 men. So you can't have a child. You can't have a non-Jew. You can't have this, you can't have that. It goes through a whole list of people. Comes the Gemara. The Gemara then says, I don't understand Mishnah. What's the Mishnah even saying that a non-Jew can't be part of the 3? Let's say you eat a meal in your workplace, you have 2 Jews and 1 person who's not Jewish working. You have 3 partners. Every day you sit down for lunch together. Why would you think that when you're blessing God for your, Jewish prayers, that you should include a non-Jew in the grace after meal? The Gemara says, why would you even think to include a non-Jew? Shita. It's like something you don't even tell me, right? So this is classical balancing act. The Mishnah says you can't include a non-Jew, right? We know that's the law. But the Gemara is going to want to understand what would be the other way of thinking. Why would we even think to include a non-Jew? And we need to say that you shouldn't include a non-Jew. So the Gemara is then going to give us the other way of thinking. And that other way of thinking might make sense. And you would say, oh, this other way, maybe you should include a non-Jew. And then the Gemara is going to say, but still, I'm going to give you the other way of thinking why the Mishnah says you still can't include a non-Jew. The grace after meal.
So include it, whether the non-Jew could say the grace with you?
Whether you, as I mentioned before you say the grace after meal, you first, if you have 3 men there, you say, let's bless God. You first invite everyone. You say, Rabbi Tainavarish, before the grace after the meal begins. So first you say, let's do it. So, but only if there are 3 men there. So let's see the Gemara inside. Let's see what the Gemara says and the Gemara's answer. But before actually we see the Gemara inside, let's actually ask, what's your thought process? What would be your reasoning why you perhaps think to include someone who's not Jewish into a Jewish grace after meal?
Assuming we all believe in God, in one God.
Okay, maybe they all believe in the same God. You're saying he's not a Christian.
I don't know, say,
He's B'nai Noah.
He's a B'nai Noach. Maybe he's someone that lived in Israel. Okay,
Bread, that God calls bread.
well, we're saying let's bless God. Why should he not plan to bless God? Right? He's not Jewish. He's not saying the whole.
Why?
It
Non-Jews can bless God too.
could, but they're not going to say the Jewish prayers of blessing God. So it's a Jewish prayer.
And it would raise the same question about having a minyan. Can you have count a non-Jew at a minyan? I'm sure.
And here's Jack is saying if that's the case, you could also include an Andrew and a minion, right?
Right.
But you wouldn't. Right, right. So what would be the logic? What would be the thought process here? So let's see over here. Let's see text number 4. Okay. Let's turn to page 177. For real. Neil.
Counting that is sort of the moon, the blessing after meal. This is obvious. But why are we dealing with what are we dealing with in this case? With a convert who has undergone circumcision that has not yet immersed himself in the mitzvah. Okay.
So here the Gemara gives us an interesting answer. The Gemara says something like this. We're not talking about a regular non-Jew who's not Jewish. Of course, someone who's not Jewish, of course he can be part of a Jewish prayer. He's not Jewish. He's not planning to pray. How would you even say to include him? We're talking about a unique type of situation. Someone is going through conversion, and he already got his bris, and he basically needs to wait for the bris to heal so he can go to the mikvah. He's already practicing all of Judaism. He's in a few days he's going to be a Jew. You would think to say this guy's already half Jewish. Include him, and especially he's practicing and he's learning, right? So let him be part of it. And the Mishnah says no. Until he's actually Jewish, we're not going to yet be able to include him in the grace after meal part. But you see the way the Gemara works. The point here is that the way the whole Gemara works is that we could bring one idea, but the Gemara is going to want to say, but why don't you see the other way? You tell it to me this way, but I can tell it to you the other way. Why are you saying it's this way? Maybe it's the opposite way, right? So Gemara is going to always many of us in our life, right? We say, this is the way it should be. No, this is the way you think it should be. But what about a different person? Maybe he thinks a different way it should be. So what about if a person, their whole life, they would think this way of Talmud? They would come and they would say, you're having a discussion. So let's discuss this concept. Okay, this is an interesting concept. I think this way, but I would think that somebody else could think a different way. And now let me explain to you why the way I think is the way I still think it this way. But there's still room for this way. So this is a very powerful way of thinking. And imagine if you would live this way in your life, you would then be able to appreciate other people's thinking, other people's way of thought, right? And you would talk that way, right? There's a discussion. You say, okay, I think this should be the answer, but I want to try to understand another way of thinking, and I'm going to still go back and explain why my way of thinking is still the right way of thinking. This is a beautiful way. That's why you learn Talmud, you can be a lawyer. Right? So many Talmudists are lawyers. Why? Because what does Talmud help you understand? It goes this way, then it goes the other way, and it's but still this way is the right way. It analyzes every single piece and every single word back and forth. And this argument, that argument, and then back to my original argument, why my original argument is the right argument. But I still appreciate your argument. So this is a very, very important idea in Talmud. It's called a balancing act. The balancing act, where we have it one way, but I'll balance it to understand the other way, and I'm going to come to understand both ways of thinking.
where you have, it says, the person is convert is not considered a Jew until he's gone to the mikveh. So what are you balancing here?
Balancing, the idea that we're balancing here is we're going to think to say that in this situation, you could allow it. You can allow it. This is a unique situation. The guy already got his bris. He's just waiting for his bris to heal so he can dip into the water. He's already basically half Jewish, and he's already practicing old Judaism. So let him be part of it, right? Meaning, I give you the other way of thinking. He's not a regular non-Jew. He's a non-Jew, but he's not he's not really a non-Jew. He's already halfway there. So basically, the point is, I'll give you a logic this way, I'll give you a logic that way, and I'll still say at the end of the day, this logic is still going to prevail, but that logic still makes sense. It still has room. Correct. Halacha says that there's 3 steps to conversion, right? And 2 of them there's going to the mikveh and circumcision. So therefore, you need to have it at all. But you could still think that there's room to say this person is not really fully not Jewish. There is already someone there, like in Jewish law, there's a person who's a servant, an eved, for someone who's Jewish. He accepts upon himself some of Judaism. We don't fully consider him a non-Jew. We consider him a servant to a Jew, and actually, once he's freed, he becomes fully Jewish. But when he's a servant, he's not considered a Jew. We can't consider him part of a minyan, but he still doesn't have the status of someone who's not Jewish either. So we have these situations where someone could be like in the middle ground. So therefore, you might have room to say that this person could be in the middle ground, and maybe welcome him in. The point is not to get lost in this specific case, but to understand the way Talmud works. Talmud works is it gives you both reasonings. And even if one reasoning is going to be the halacha, like we say, whenever there's an argument between Hillel and Shammai, the law is always like Hillel. Abaye and Rava, the law is always like Rava, except for in 6 cases, it's like Abaye. We said that last week, right? So what do we say? So never learn his Shammai, never learn Abaye. No. We're going to try to understand it. Hillel. We're going to try to understand Shammai. We're going to understand both reasonings, both ways of thinking, and then we're going to come to a depth of why Hillel is still right, why Rava is still right? That will give you a much deeper appreciation for the whole concept. Not just, this is the law. Okay, you got to go like this. No, I'll give it to you this way. I'll give it to you that way. I'll give you proofs this way, you proofs that way, and I'm going to still come back to this original way. That's okay. Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, Alan's asking.
We're counting Jews from prayers after meal. Do we count women? Do we count people who aren't bar mitzvah? They're Jewish.
Right. So I don't want to get lost into that law, but the Mishnah goes through a whole list of people who are not counted. It needs to be male because only men are technically obligated in this mitzvah. Women don't have that status of obligation, and therefore they can make their own zimmer technically. Women can make their own, but it's not joined. There's men can make their own, women can make their own. Jewish man, yeah, whatever. Let's not get into this as a side, right? It's a good question, but we're not right now discussing all laws of grace after meal. I can explain it to you all at great length, maybe after the class. Jack, you want to add something?
It also related to a Mazuman benching, which we could talk about later.
Right. Okay, fine. We'll also talk later. Fine. So now let's go. By the way, converts in Judaism, there were some of the greatest people in our history. Rabbi Akiva, many others. Our next course that we're going to have in May is going to be about great personalities in Judaism. It's an amazing class. And some of them we're going to talk about 3 of the great converts in Judaism. The famous people. Shmaya, Talia, some of the great sages were converts. So, It's not all putting down converts, on the contrary. And the truth is, we're all converts. All Jews are converted to Judaism, became a Jew, right? So there's a line in Rashi. He says, you can't ever make fun of someone who converted. Why? Because you're also a convert. Every Jew converted. Everybody was born right as a Jew. We're all, and not converted, became right, and became a Jew. Okay. So now that we had primarily these few fundamental understandings, now let's go through a new subject in the Talmud. A new subject. And remember, you're going to have these two skills, halt and cup, and the balancing act. It's very important, okay, for these two skills. And it's going to be based on, let's just go through these slides we missed. Okay. Okay. So we're going to bring a subject from a tractate that's called Nizikin. As you remembered, we spoke that there are 6 tractate subjects in the Mishnah. The fourth one is called Nizikin. Okay? But there was one very long one that was called Tractate Nizikin. That was all the laws of damaging. And because the rabbi said that this one was way too long, they said, let us split it into 3 different parts. Because it was a 30-chapter, very long book, and they split it into 3. And that they called Baba Kama. Anyone knows the other ones? Baba Mitzia and Baba Batra. Very good. And there's a guy here in Lakeview, an older Jew. His name was Leon Hoffman. As a little kid, he used to learn in yeshiva. He used to tell me, we used to say Baba Kama, Baba Mitzia, Baba Batra, and Baba Meister. Okay. I also heard that when I was a kid, but I'll attribute it to him. Okay. So Baba Kama primarily talks about claims of damage. Baba Mitzia discusses loans, bailments, if you find an object, employment contracts. And Baba Basra primarily talks about property rights, different regulations surrounding property and real estate transactions. Okay? So here, we're going to go to a Mishnah from the 6th chapter in Baba Mitzia. Okay? This is the tractate that talks about hiring employees. By the way, we learned one of the lines from this Mishnah in our first class. If you remember, it's great. If not, don't worry about it, because that's going to be the rest of today's subject. And remember, if you didn't understand anything until now, that's okay. But from now on, gotta put on your halting cup and stay there with me. Okay? It's gonna be a little back and forth, but at the end, you'll really appreciate it. Okay? So let's start off by reading the Mishnah. That's number 5. Let's see it, page 179.
If one hired worker deceived each other, parties have no claim of liability against each other. They merely have a right to complain. If one hired a donkey driver or a porter to fetch canopy posts or wedding and funeral fleas, or workers to raise flax in the cooking pit, or any other task involving feeding out what we lost, the task is not performed immediately and they cancel, the individual may hire replacement workers at their expense.
Okay. So here's an interesting Mishnah. We learned the first one, the first case, which we're going to talk about in just a moment at great length. But let's just quickly go through the second case, which is quite simple. Basically, if you hire someone and they bounce on you last minute, then you need to quickly hire someone else. Right? Let's say you have your flax is in a pot and you got to get it out at a certain time, 12 o'clock, midday, right? So you call someone in the morning, you say, could you go to my house and take it off for me? And the guy says, yeah. At 11:30, the guy cancels on you. You're like, oh my gosh, I got to find someone. You start calling all these places. Could you run to my house in 30 minutes? 30 minutes. I'm going to charge you for that, $200. So now, the first guy, you're going to pay him $100. Now you got to hire someone because you got to get him there quickly for $200. You could charge your first guy $100 and he made you lose. Pretty simple, pretty clear, very, very easy to understand. Okay? But the question is the first case. The first case is a very upended case. We're not really sure what's going on over here. How you hired workers, they deceive each other. The parties have no claim or liability against each other, but they have only really the ability to complain, write a bad review. What case is this? So initially, we would think to say, the Gemara say, we could look from the second case to the third case. Just like the second case. They cancel you. So too, the first case is also the employee canceled on you, right? So if he canceled on you, you can't complain to him. What's the case that he canceled you, you can't complain? Maybe he canceled on you a week before. You hired a band to play your wedding, right? And they canceled on you 2 weeks before. There's still ample time to come out of the band. You didn't lose any money. You could complain, you could write a bad review, right? You might think you can write a bad review because of Lashon Hara, you can't speak negative about a Jew, right? But in this case, Talmud says, we let you write a bad review, but he didn't really make you lose any money. So therefore, in this case, there's no complaints of money. So it's a similar case. Cancel. One, they made you lose money, you got to pay back money. Another one, they didn't make you lose money, you can't force them to pay any money, make you write a bad review. What's the problem with this way of thinking? What's the problem with this answer? What's the line in the Mishnah? What is the wording in the Mishnah? Does a Mishnah say they cancel on you? What's the wording in the Mishnah? Try to use your Gemara head. What would be the Gemara's question of the answer that I just gave you? Remember, we're going to try to understand this first line of the Mishnah at great length. It's going to be one way, another way, another way, another way, another way, another way, like 15 different ways. It's going to be a full page of Talmud right now. We're going to learn. Anyone? Try to look at the line of the Mishnah and what's one of the words there that won't really fit with our, yeah? Who's that?
Brian, they said deceived, not canceled.
Deceived. Very good. The Mishnah says deceived. Say cancel on you. He says he deceived you. He says he cancel. There's two different total meanings. One is cancel. I cancel you. But he deceived you. He deceived me. He made me lose something. He tricked me. So just a canceling on me. So it can't be a cancellation case. So now we need to understand the case of our Mishnah. And this is what the Gemara is going to want to go back and forth to try to understand what is the case of our Mishnah. It can't just be a case of canceling, because then the Mishnah would say cancel. It says deceived. Deceived is not canceling. Now we need to really understand. So now the Gemara goes on a whole long back and forth to try to understand our case. And we're going to bring one case and another case, another case, another case. So follow along. Okay? We're going to have the slides. We're going to also have it inside. So we're going to go together. Okay? Now, we want to understand who deceived you, right? If the employer deceived the workers materially, meaning, let's use the wording of the Mishnah. In those days, they didn't have what was called dollars or shekel. They had what was called zuz. Zuz is the currency of the town. Zuz. It's like, let's say, the zuz is $100. Okay? So let's say he said, pay you 4 zuz a day, $400 a day. Okay? And then he only pays them 3 zuz per day. That would be outright fraud, right? And for sure, the workers have a legal claim against the employer. You got to pay it back. On the other hand, if the assumption was just bad material, let's say he said, okay, they're going to work in my wheat field. They come, and the guy doesn't know a wheat field. It's a barley field. You tricked me. I was ready to work in your wheat field, and I'm coming to work in a barley field. Oh my gosh, I'm not ready to work in your barley field. Come on. You know what I mean? Right? So that's the right to complain. It's the right to complain. But ultimately, if it's deception, it's not really what's matter, right? So the Gemara has this real puzzle. What is the case of deception that could really be the case of our Mishnah that there's this ruling? In which case, could the workers have a real claim, just like a claim, oh, you told me wheat that is barley, right? But they can't claim back any money. In the first case, they can claim back their money. You say you're going to give me $4, you want to give me $3. $300, you got to give me $100 more, right? So you have to decide what's the real case of here, right? So it can't be just like you're kvetching, whatever, right? Because it has to be something of deceiving, a real deceiving. So there needs to be something a little more than just four for 3 or wheat for barley, whatever, right? So which case is our mission? So since the Talmud is primarily a legal analysis of the Mishnah, of the Mishnah, the Gemara is going to want to understand what is the law in this case, right? Why is the law in this case? And this is the way the Gemara goes back and forth. What is the law here? Why is the law here? And what's going on over here? So the primary question of our Gemara is going to be, what is the law in this or that case, right? I'm sorry, the primary question is not what is the law, what is the law is different time. The Gemara is going to ask, what can possibly be the right solution to our Mishnah? The Gemara is going to go back and forth to try and understand what could possibly be the right solution to our Mishnah. It's going to go try to understand this way, and now it's just telling you the law. There's a Jewish scientist, I forgot his name was, come back to me very soon. He said, I became a scientist because my kids in my class, when they came home, their mother asked them, what did you learn today? They said, what they learned. I learned this. When I came home, my mother asked me, what question did you ask today? That's what the Gemara is going to want to understand. What question can we ask to really understand the Gemara? It's going to be, what is the law? What is the law? I want to understand what's the question. What is the question that we can ask to try to fully understand what is the case of our Mishnah? Okay? So, we have a Mishnah that describes a case of deception and hiring. The Mishnah rules that the victim of deception has no real legal claim, but he has a right to complain. So the question is, what case can fit a case of this? They have, number one, deception, but no legal claim to ask back for money. Okay? Clear? Okay. Now, what makes this puzzle really difficult is that we're going to see that it's a very, very narrow balancing act. Because on one hand, you have a legal claim, but you don't have a legal claim to ask for money, but a legal claim to complain, right? There's a legal claim here, but it's not strong enough to ask for money, but it's strong enough to actually have the ability to write a bad review. So it's a really unique balancing act that we're going to want to try to, get to the right position, not too much this way, not too much that way, just right in the middle. Okay? So the Gemara is going to solve this problem. One of the ways, and we're going to go through a few of the ways, one of the ways it's going to solve the problem is by introducing a new element into the whole case. We thought it was someone hiring someone. But what if you say it wasn't somebody hiring employees? It was someone that was very wealthy. He had no time to hire employees. So what did he do? He got an agent to go and find the right employees. He's like, I'm too busy. I'm running this company. But I have this field that needs to be plowed, Could you do me a favor and get me the right workers to work in my field? I need them to dig a ditch, a water canal to go through, something. Could you get me the right people to do the work for me? The guy says, sure, I'll get you the right people. I'm good at this. I know how to find people. And then here, because we're bringing a third party here, now let's see what's going to happen over here. Okay? Okay. Okay. So here we have we got the employer who's hiring an employee to go bring two people to work in his field. Okay? So now let's see the case. Let's see the case. Let's see page 180. Okay, let's read here text the gray box, exercise 5.1 in page 180. Okay, Alan, what do you think?
Albert owns a field. He asks Barry to hire laborers for specific work in the field, and he stipulates the wages he's prepared to pay. Barry hires Charles and David to do the work, and he informs them they will get paid at a different rate from the wages Albert has stipulated. Once the work is complete, Charles and David claim the wages they believe they are, and the discrepancy is discovered. What do you believe the law should be in this case?
Anyone wants to give their thought process before we start discussing it?
To get the wages that Albert proposed,
Do you think they should get the wages that Albert proposed? Why?
because he was the first one they spoke to, it's his field, and Barry should have been informed when he tells them that they will get paid a different. No. Yeah.
Yeah.
Barry told to Charles and David it was a certain rate, and now they didn't.
Right.
So even if they learned that the original rate was higher, they still
If they agree to the original rate, and they should have to keep it. Very, very good, Listen.
The original, they were ranking Barry and negotiating.
Yeah.
And the difference is either windfall for Albert or he's got to come up with some more money.
Okay, that's a good one.
It doesn't say here also, or it says here, Barry's hired to do the work, but he informs they will get paid a different rate. And then, well, that means that if they did the work, if they did the work, then by doing the work, then they agreed to get paid. That's why.
Okay, good. Okay. Alan brings up a good point. Doesn't say who promised more or who promised less. Okay, that's a good point. So you understand a little bit of the way the Talmud could understand and analyze this case. Okay, now that you put a third person in, let's start asking ourselves a question like this. What would happen if Albert said that he was looking for workers to work for 4 zuz per day, but Barry, he told the workers, I'm only going to give you 3 zuz per day, right? The day was over, and they agreed to 3. They agreed to work for $300. Now they hear that they could have gotten 400, right? Right? Obviously, Charles and David are very unhappy, right? They claim that they should be paid $400. This is what the owner was ready to give them, right? Albert was willing to pay that. Albert argues that since they agreed to only get $300, 3 zuz, that's the amount that they're going to be paid. So this could be very good. This could be the case of our Mishnah, right? Where Charles and David, they don't have a legal claim on Albert, but they can be grumpy about not receiving their extra wage. I read a bad review of Barry, or maybe on Albert. What? The problem with this answer is this doesn't really work good. Why? This does seem promising, but the Gemara responds and says this can't be the case. This cannot be the case. Why can't this be the case? Because they agreed. They accepted that lower wage. So they can't say and complain later. They can't come and complain. They can't even write a negative report on this one. It's their problem. They didn't have to agree to it. So this cannot be the case of our Mishnah. Okay? So now let's try the other way around. So the Gemara then goes back and says, let's go the opposite way. Let's say that Albert said, I'm going to give them $300. Barry comes and quotes them and says, I need to hire you guys to do some work for my boss. And he's going to be ready to pay you $400. By the way, and he explains that, no, I did not say that, right? I only said three. Barry is saying four, right? They're working a long day. They're toiling. They did a good job. They can't wait to get their $400 at the end of the day. And they come to pick up their paycheck. And in the envelope is $300. They're fuming. They're fuming. Where's my $400? He said, what do you mean $400? I said $400. I said $300. Right? So then they said, 1 second. Well, you said 300. We were told 400. Right? This almost sounds like the perfect solution for our Mishnah. Right? They really complain on Albert. Albert never said $400. Right? Right? Barry says it's not his problem. He's just an agent. He's so sorry, but there's nothing for him to do about this, right? He go speak to the boss. He didn't do any work for me. What?
Depends on what an agency.
Oh, okay. We'll get that in a moment. That's a good one, right? So over here, perhaps this is a great solution where you have, the balancing act, where they have the right to complain, but they're not going to get any money out of it because Albert doesn't really have to give them. He only promised me. But the Gemara says, no, this is not so fast. Why? Because what if when hiring Charles and David, Barry said, I'm going to pay you $4 per day. Right? They don't have a complaint on Albert. They have a complaint on Barry. And the Gemara says this is actually a brisa. There's actually a clear brisa that says very clear. If someone hired an agent to hire people for him, and the agent stipulated a larger amount, and the agent needs to then pay them, and then come to his boss, and the boss will pay him back the amount that he said he's going to pay, and the agent is going to lose out of this. So again, this can't be the case, right? So this case doesn't either work. So it can't be our Mishnah, because if this would be our Mishnah, then the employees could just go to Barry and say, give us $400, and then Barry will go to Albert and say, give me back 300 of the 400. And he'll get back $300, but he'll have to lose $100.
Are you saying it's not the Mishnah in the first sentence or the second sentence?
Oh, the first sentence doesn't work for one reason. The second sentence doesn't work for the other reason, right? The first sentence doesn't work because they accept it. The second sentence doesn't work because they could go and complain on Barry. They could get their extra money, but they have to go to Barry, right? So both of these cases don't work, right? Yes. Yeah. We're gonna get that in a moment. The actual cases where, yeah? Okay. So we're narrowing down our options over here, right? We know that the case must be where Barry quoted a higher wage than Albert was willing to pay. But since he said that the wages were Albert's responsibility, the workers cannot lodge a claim against him. And since Albert never committed to that higher wage, then the workers are only entitled to the original wage, which is 3. So therefore, they don't have a lien. So now the Gemara is going to give us a new piece to this whole piece, and that is the Gemara is going to introduce a new element. In our modern labor marketplace, wages are very fluid. But in many societies back in the days, there was fixed wages. There's a fixed wage. And so therefore, the Gemara says that in this case, we're talking about a case where it was a fixed wage. So seemingly, the price of his quoted shouldn't really even matter. Everyone knows the price. You work at this job, you work in someone's field, you do a job. This is what you get. You do this work. This is how much you're paid. Who knows? You make a kiddush. How much does the kiddush cost in shul? It costs the money. It doesn't matter if I told you it costs more or less. This is how much a kiddush costs in shul. Everybody knows this is the price. Nobody has to tell you the price. And even if you spend more or less or more, this is the price, right? So if the standard wage in the area is 4 zuz per day, Albert should be responsible because that's the value of the work that they produce. If the standard wage is 3 zuz in that city, right, then the workers don't have any complaint because that's what they're being paid for the work. So the Gemara's first solution says like this. That the Mishnah can be talking about a place where there's no standard wage in that city. If there's a standard wage, everyone knows. But if there's no standard wage in that city, it's a city where it's free for all. You could pay the guy more, or you could pay the guy less. People are paid more, people are paid less. It doesn't matter, right? So over here is where we're getting to our case. Let's take for a moment. Let's look at okay. Here if the halt cup. Barry said that the wages would be 4. And they're going to be paid not by Barry. That Barry said you're going to be paid by Albert. You're paid by the boss. So he didn't involve himself. He didn't say I'm paying you for the work. He said Albert is going to pay you 4. Okay? Albert really said he's only paying 3. Barry made up the 4, right? This is the case, right? The workers have no claim against Barry because over here, Barry didn't say, I'm going to pay you 4. When we said that the Talmud says that Barry has to pay the 4, it's only if Barry says, I'm going to pay you 4. That's not price. But if Barry didn't say, I'm going to pay you, he said that Albert's going to pay you when he hired you, then he never assumed responsibility for this, right? So they don't have a claim against Albert because Albert only said 3. They can't either have a complaint, they can't either ask back from Barry because Barry never said that he's going to pay the 4. Barry just said, I'm hiring you on behalf of Albert for 4. He lied. It's true. It's true he lied, but he never said that he's going to pay. So therefore, the Mishnah says, the Gemara says that this is the solution where they can have a complaint against Barry. They can write a bad review. The employees can write a bad review on Barry for lying to them, for deceiving them, What? What do you mean? You don't get compensation if he never assumed responsibility. He never assumed responsibility. But a second.
It's basically more like an advertising thing, right? Like someone was handing out flyers and said, Walmart. And then you go to Walmart and see the shoes are actually $7.99. Probably they were $5.99, but that doesn't mean Walmart's going to sell it to you for that price, right?
Walmart, you know in advance, the shoes are going to be less or more than what you were told. This way you already did your work and you rely on this agent.
But even if it's really far to Walmart, you said, "Oh, I spent 3 hours driving to Walmart because I thought it was $5.99." You can complain about it. You're still not going to get the shoes for $5.99.
That's a great point, Alan. I like that. Beautiful. Okay, that's one of the answers. We're going to give a few answers. That's one answer. Remember, this whole healthy cup, right? We're trying to keep our mind on this. The Gemara now suggests another solution. That work even a place where the standard wage was 3. So we said it was a case where there's no standard wage. And therefore we could say, right? And how don't have a responsibility. Okay, let's say the place where the standard wage was 3. The core argument that we made earlier was, why should the workers not be able to complain if the standard wage is 3 per day, since there's no way for them to earn more money? That's a standard wage, right? Even if they wanted to get more. But what if we have these 2 workers, Charles and David? They aren't really workers. They're not people that work. These are sophisticated people, people that own businesses. They don't usually go and work, but they heard of a good deal. They heard of a good deal. And they said, oh, usually for this type of work, you get paid bupkis. This guy's ready to give hundreds of dollars for 1 day's work. I'm ready to do this. It's worth it for me to make, you know, I'll get $400 for this day for this work. Usually I only get $300, a few dollars, $400 is good money. I'm ready to do that, for that serious amount of work. So these are not regular labor people. These are regular people. They're only choosing to do this because they want the extra income. Because they know in this case they can get more money. So now when Barry says that they're going to get 4 zuz, they're going to get $400, they're making this decision to hire themselves out, which usually they won't get hired out, right? If Barry told them the truth, there's only 3 zuz, so they would never agree to work in that case. So now their complaint is on Barry, that Barry deceived them. Because they only engaged in labor. They knew that the standard wage is 3. They know that everybody for this job gets only 3. But they thought that Barry was trying to be nice to them. Barry was giving them a good deal. Barry was their friend. Barry was going to get them a deal, and they're going to get extra money over here. So therefore, they hired themselves out, which they usually wouldn't do. Now they're complaining on Barry. They have a complaint on Barry, right? They have a complaint on Barry, but they can't actually go to Albert and say, give me the money. Because Albert never promised them 4. Albert only promised them 3. It was Barry was the one that said he's going to give them 4. But Barry didn't say he's going to give them 4. Again, Barry didn't say, I'm going to give you 4. Barry said that Albert's going to give you 4. And in that case, if Barry didn't say that I'm going to give you 4, Barry said that Albert's going to give you 4. That's not the case of the price that says that Barry needs to pay the 4 and then get the money back from Albert. That's a different case. In that case, they can have a complaint, but they can't come. Yes.
Why would Barry or Albert hire people who are not qualified?
Well, maybe they're very qualified. Maybe these are people.
But if they did something else and they don't.
Maybe these are people that own tremendous amount of fields. They've done this for many years, but now they're like, they're owners of fields. They don't go and work in fields. But they're like, oh, you know what? We could get some good money today.
But why would they do that?
If they want good money.
But if they don't feel.
Whatever, they want some extra cash today, right? Yeah, their money is tied up. Their money is tied up in some, in some commercial thing, but they need some money to buy some food, right? But they want some good extra money. So that's second solution. The third solution is that the workers, they knew that they're going to be paid 4 zuz per day, which is extra money. They know everybody in this city only gets 3 zuz, so this is a fixed city solution. And they knew that they are going to get real good money over here. So they said, you know what, this owner is a really nice guy. We're going to work extra hard for him. We're going to do a good job for him. We're going to do a good job for this guy. Okay?
Yeah, when you're hired, it's not something extra.
Right, but over here, they're going to do an extra good job. They're going to show the owner that they're going to work hard for him. They're going to work hard for him in this case. Okay? And they put in extra hard work. They do work that normally would take a day and a half. And they do it in a day's work. They come at the end of the day and they say to the guy, come on, I hear what you're saying that you only said you're going to give 3. And that's standard in our city is 3, and we don't really have complaints on you, right? But we did good work for you. Like, I think it's only right for you to pay us, for our work. And the owner then says, you know what, that's an interesting point. You guys did good. You guys are claiming that you did good work, right? So now, maybe over here, we should say the guys should get, if they did harder work, they should get their extra wages, right? So in that case, they don't have a legal claim, technically, right? Because they only stipulated 3, but they could, do a real complaint against Barry for misleading them, and because of this misleading, they put in extra work. So that could also be a case. The Gemara now is asking on this last answer. We just now gave 3 answers. The Gemara is going to ask now on the 3rd answer with the extra hard work. Halkaf. The Gemara says this. 1 second, not so fast. If ordinary workers, let's say, only harvest this amount, only harvest a certain amount, and over here they harvest amount for like a day and a half work, they did a lot more work. Shouldn't they be paid more? Right? The Gemara asks on this last answer, and the Gemara answers that if it's a standard case, yes, they will get paid more. But in our case, where we're going to say that we're not going to pay them more, it's a unique case. It's a case where they're digging an irrigation ditch. And because they're digging an irrigation ditch, the skill, the labor over here of digging it is a tremendous skill. But when the owner came to see, there's a lot of water that was in there. He can't really see what they did. He doesn't know if they really worked harder or they didn't work harder. And therefore, in that case, we can't say that he has to give them more. If you could clearly see that they did work and they did do good work and more work, then he'll have to pay them. But if it's a case or an irrigation ditch where you can't see it, there they can just complain and they could mention about it, but they can't actually make him pay more. Okay? And over here, so the Gemara is making a fascinating pivot over here. Earlier, we assumed that in the case where Albert said that he's going to pay more and Barry said he's only going to pay 3, there's no grounds and they have to accept it. But the Gemara says, no, right? Over here, they could actually get it unless in irrigation, he doesn't know, so therefore they can't get it. Okay. Now the Gemara is going to give another answer. Another answer. One final answer. Actually, one more after this one. Okay? And that is like this. The Gemara questions our whole assumption. Perhaps, the Gemara says, when the Mishnah says that they have a right to complain, their complaint is not for the fact that they did to receive more money, but they're not receiving less. Maybe the complaint is actually for the fact that if Barry quoted Albert's proposal correctly, they would have received more money than they're going to receive now. That's what their complaint is. They didn't have the right opportunity. They didn't have the right opportunity. If they would have known the original amount, they would have had the right opportunity. And the Gemara says, no. In that, right? The Gemara says, reassures, and it says, in that situation, the Gemara actually quotes a line from Proverbs. It teaches that one should not deprive someone of an opportunity to gain something. And that's the basis of their complaint. Okay? So the workers have grounds to complain because the agent caused them to forgo the opportunity to earn perhaps a higher wage because they didn't know what the owner said. They didn't have the right amount, but they can't actually complain. They could actually complain. They can't actually ask for more. Okay. This is
when you say complain, they recover damage.
recover the damage. Exactly.
Because anyone can complain that.
Yeah, they can't ask back for the damages. Yes.
Question when you collapse. So complain means they can ask for the damages?
So I'm sorry, let me explain this last way. The last way is going back to the original case where Barry said 4 and the agent said 3. And we said that they should be able to complain back. They should want the 4, right? Because the employer said 4, right? They want back their 4. The first 3 answers was in a case where the employer said 3 and the agent said 4, and they only get 3, and they can have complaints, right? The last answer that we're giving here is that the agent The employer said 4. The agent said 3. And what's their complaint? The complaint is that they were deceived. They were deceived. They would have known. If they would have known, they would have been able to, gotten more out of it. That's what their complaint is.
Question.
Yeah.
I'm confused about the word complaint then, because I thought complaint.
The complaint is on the agent. The complaint is on the agent,
Then-
not on the employer. The complaint is on the agent.
But I thought the complaint just meant they could, for example, write a bad review, not actually get damages.
Right. The complaint, exactly. The complaint, exactly. Yes, that's true. The complaint is on the agent. They're going to write a bad review on this agent. They say, this is a bad agent. Nobody should use this agent anymore because we could have gotten 4. We only got 3 because of agent. Okay? If you look at page 181, you'll see these 4 answers in the box. Right? The first 3 is where the employer said 3, the agent said 4. And the question was if there was a fixed wage, or if there wasn't a fixed wage, or if there's a fixed wage, but the workers invested extra work. And the last case is where the agent said 4, and the complaint is not against the agent said 3, and the employer said 4, and the complaint is not about the employer. The complaint is on the agent. Okay? What? Well, it's yeah. They're complaining about that. Yeah. Okay. Now the Gemara is going to give a 5th solution, and you're going to laugh on this one. Okay. The 5th solution is like this. Okay. So we have balancing act. Go through the slides. Okay. 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 Now the Gemara says something where you weren't expecting. But this is all the halting cup. We had this one line from the Mishnah. We have one way, another way, another way, another way, another way. And now the Gemara comes to the end, and it says, in the beginning we said that our whole Mishnah was talking about a case where workers canceled on you. There was a second case, canceled, right? You hired workers to get out your flax from your hut, and they canceled on you. So we said that was the second case. Must be also the first case of those where they canceled on you, right? But we said no. The wording in the Mishnah was the hitu, that they deceived. It wasn't canceled. Deceiving is a much stronger word than just canceled, right? So the Gemara is going to go and say the word hitu, we actually need to change that word. It doesn't mean misled, but we're actually going to change that word and say that it actually means that chazru. That we're going to change the word that they also went back. We changed the one word of the Mishnah, and it can also be canceled. Meaning that the second case is that they canceled on you and you lost money out of it. Because they canceled you like last second. The first case is that they canceled you a week before. You had enough time. And therefore, the first case could be very simple. The whole mission could talk about you hired workers to work for you. Let's say you hired a band to play at your daughter's wedding, right? And the band canceled on you a month before. However, yeah, you can complain. You can say there's a bad band. They cancel on people. I hired them a year ago and they cancel. But you can't really have monetary complaints because you still have a month. Well, what if they cancel you the morning of the wedding? The morning of the wedding, you gotta have to find the new band. The morning of the wedding, then you could charge the first band, right? And that's the way the Gemara concludes with explaining our Mishnah. That the first way of the Mishnah, this is the 5th way, is not misled, but it's chazri. Chazri means that they canceled. They canceled. And the Gemara goes and brings a brisa that will actually bring exactly this idea. A different brisa that says the same thing, and it uses the word that they cancel. They didn't mislead, they cancel you. So after this whole back and forth, the Gemara can come back to our original way, a simple way of just explaining the Mishnah. And this is classic Gemara. So the Gemara will go, if you look on page 182, 183, 184, 185, 186, 187, 188, right? 189, 190, 91, 92, 93, etc. You'll see this whole Gemara back and forth. I challenge you to do Chazar, which is to learn it over, everything we just spoke about. You'll read through it. You'll have a whole deep appreciation. I wish we had time to go through each one of these at great length. But this is basically the back and forth, and this is the whole page of Gemara that we just learned. I just want to conclude with one thing, and that is like this. All this that we learned is in the Babylonian Talmud. But what is all of this in the Jerusalem Talmud? In the Jerusalem Talmud, I'll give you an example of the Passover Mishnah. The Babylonian Talmud gives us one opinion, the other opinion, the back and the forth and the bright and the right. What does the Jerusalem Talmud say? The Jerusalem Talmud says, page 195, to turn to page 195. Let's see text number 6.
The evil cast that were from close to the time where he started and the Mincha where it was set to. And the Mishnah followed read by
The Jerusalem Talmud just says one word. How the Mishnah follows Rabbi Yehuda. That's it. It just says. The Jerusalem Talmud doesn't go into whole discussion. We have two opinions, Rabbi Yossi, Rabbi Yehuda, and then you have a price that shows it this way. And was the price true? Is the price not true? The Jerusalem Talmud just goes and says straight. Our Mishnah is like Rabbi Yehuda. Rabbi Yehuda says that every holiday you're not allowed to eat. And that includes Pesach. And why does he use the word Pesach? There's different opinions why he uses. Maybe it's trying to include also the second Pesach. We have a second Pesach, a month after Pesach. There's different reasons why I might say the word Pesach in the Mishnah. But it's referred to every holiday like Rabbi Yehuda's opinion. That's it. So the Jerusalem Talmud just cuts straight to the chase. The same is true in our case that we were just learning in Bava Metzia, the whole back and forth, right? With the employee, the Mishnah will just right away go and I'll tell you the exact law. That's referring to a case where they canceled. Not give us the whole 4 and a 3 and a 3 and a 4 and the agent or in a city where they have a stipulation. If they have a stipulation, the agent worked, if the employers worked harder, right? I'll just say it straight. It's referring. They're both referring to canceling. One is referring to the monetary loss, and it's referring to non-monetary loss. That's it. That's it between Jerusalem Talmud and a Babylonian Talmud. Why is there this difference? Let's see what the Talmud says, page 195, text 7.
You set me down in darkness as those forever dead. Rabbi Jeremiah said this refers to the Babylonian Talmud.
So this is actually quote from the Babylonian Talmud. We have this. It's a quote from Eicha. We say it Tisha B'Av. Eicha yashva b'da. And one of the lines in there is, you set me in darkness. What's in darkness? I have to go to exile. And in exile, I'm in darkness. What's the darkness of exile? This way of learning. I have a question, I have another question. Look at the Jerusalem Talmud. Everything is light, everything is clear. Everything is, right? The way it should be. The Babylonian Talmud is so confusing. It gives us one way, it gives us another way, it gives us the third way, it gives us a fourth way. It's always asking questions. But the truth is, this way of thinking gives us a whole deeper appreciation. As I said earlier, with the professor, where his mother said to him, "What question did you ask today?" Right? When you ask questions, you come to a whole different way of thinking. And that's what the Bavli way of thinking, the sages teach us. That when you learn this way, then you can come to the depth of the ideas. And why is this so powerful? Let's hear this text here on page 196, text 8.
The Babylonian Talmud is complicated analysis which seem to conceal and obscure the Torah's intellectual light. Unlike the Jerusalem Talmud, that uses the direct light method. Nevertheless, it is specifically through complex analysis involving a multitude of inquiries that we can reach the depth of the halakha far deeper than can be reached through the Jerusalem Talmud's approach. But the Jerusalem Talmud had to be aware of the back and forth of the Talmud in order to say we follow Rabbi Yehuda. So they had to be on that.
The Rabbi Yehuda point is a Mishnah. It's a Mishnah, it's a Brisa. So it wasn't a back and forth. It was just two opinions, right? Right. But it could be they were still aware of the back and forth, but they don't bring it in. Well, what do we see from all this? We see from all this a very powerful lesson that there's two experiences. One experience is everything is good. You wake up in the morning, you get your job, you have your kids, you make your money, and you pass away. The other way is you go through a struggle, you go through a challenge, you go through another challenge. But when you actually accomplish something, it's so much greater. It's so much greater. And that's the difference between Jerusalem Talmud and Babylonian Talmud. Jerusalem Talmud, everything is easy, everything is good, but it doesn't bring you to the depth of appreciation. We're not living through exile. One exile, another. Just like the Babylonian Talmud. It's so hard, it's challenging, it's another challenge. But what is this whole point for? This is all because ultimately at the end of the day, we'll come to a whole different appreciation, a whole depth of appreciation, a whole different way of thinking, and something so much more powerful than we could have ever gotten to. And that's why the Jerusalem Talmud is not that much studied. When we say Talmud, what do we refer to? We refer to the Babylonian Talmud, because that's the Jewish way of thinking. The Jewish way of thinking is in general the way we live our life. We go through a struggle, we go through a challenge. Every challenge will bring us to another incredible way of life, a deeper appreciation for life. And God willing, we won't have any more challenges because we'll have the ultimate, which will be all our pain and our suffering will be totally lost because we'll come to the redemption coming of Mashiach, where we'll be able to appreciate the beauty of everything we struggled for. We'll have only clear light. And God willing, next week, we look forward to our final class, which we're going to talk about the post-Talmud, what happened after the Talmud was concluded, and the commentators on Talmud. And we're going to learn through some of the commentators and learn actually what they brought to the Talmud and appreciate it all. So I apologize, we went a little bit over time, but I hope you could appreciate the Halton Cup and the unique way of Talmud, the back and the forth, and what Talmud brings us appreciation in general in our way of life, in everything, and the way we could, in general, live life, which is arguing things, discussing things back and forth. Okay.